The Pittsburgh Pirates took a series loss to the Arizona Diamondbacks in a little bit of deja vu. But folks, let's remember to be realistic and keep our expectations that same way.
You are Locked On Pirates, your daily Pittsburgh Pirates podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Team, your Pittsburgh Pirates every single day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Bringing you Locked On Pirates is Ethan Smith. I'm speaking about myself in the third person today here in August. What the hell? It's August already. So year is just flying by. And folks, if you want to fly by and win some money, make sure you go bet on PrizePicks and go win some free money over there. And download the app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. And we're just going to get right into it today. We're not going to do the whole social plug thing that I usually do. I did not go to the game yesterday because I was trying to break my streak of not going to games and the Pirates losing because I'm like 3-6 this year. And Mom, I'll go ahead and quote you on the show from what you said. You have to break the streak at some point, is what she told me. But yesterday was not the day. I did not go, and the streak did not get broken. Either way, very interesting series that we watched over the weekend. I completely missed the one game they won because I was covering the AAA final down here in Johnstown. So maybe I should just not watch the games anymore, Gary. That's what people will probably put in the comments as soon as I say that. But they lose 2 games to the Arizona Diamondbacks that really were interesting games, I think is the best way I can say it. Is the first game, folks, what you saw in those first 4 at-bats, you will never see again. And if you do and somebody breaks Arizona's record, that means they literally hit 4 home runs to start a game. So you will probably never see that again, or it will be a very long time before you see it again. And then the game yesterday, Colin Holderman just has something going on right now, and it's not working, but there's a lot of other factors that went to that game as well. So before we even get into the main topic of everything, Gary, what were your immediate thoughts coming out of this series again, where the Pirates just seem to have a new formidable opponent that they can't best in the Arizona Diamondbacks?
I mean, well, this series was always going to be the Pirates pitching versus the Diamondbacks offense. It was always going to be that. And the Pirates didn't put their best foot forward with pitching, really. I mean, even Paul Skeens didn't have a Paul Skeens type effort, so not that losing that game had anything to do with him, really. I mean, but the Pirates did what we kind of called out they would do before the series. We thought if they would survive their starters, they would be able to take advantage of their bullpen. And I think we saw them take advantage of their bullpen a couple times, In fact, the one game they didn't take advantage of their bullpen, they won because they took advantage of their starter. So it was a closely contested series, really. It could have gone either way. That really could have been a sweep in either direction. I'm glad it wasn't. Pirates definitely should have been able to pull out 2 of them, you would think, with the strengths that you're trying to lean on. But Colin Holderman's a problem. If anything, this series reminded me of early on when Chapman and Bednar were struggling, and it felt like, the team was doing a lot of good things, and they were just having something they really rely on falter. And you can't have that when you don't have much room for error.
Yeah, and I even reactionary-wise was saying, take Holderman out of these spots. And yesterday was probably, as you mentioned to me, probably the lowest leverage spot you could put Colin Holderman in. I mean, he was up 4-1 at that point, I believe it was.
Well, they couldn't have brought him into the 6th with 2 men on. I don't think you would have wanted that.
Mm-mm.
And, is it earlier? Yeah, it's earlier. But I don't know that I'd call that lower leverage. So bringing him in for a clean 7th made sense. In the 7th there, when you already know you're going to have Chapman going for a 3rd straight day, to me, that is about as low a leverage situation as you're going to put him in. Could they have used what's his face a couple times, maybe like an extra inning. I can't remember his name right now. Stratton.
Stratton, yeah.
Could they have used Stratton for an extra inning? I guess they could have, but Stratton hasn't done well in those situations this year. In fact, they kind of made a decision earlier on that they weren't going to do it anymore because every time they did, he got punched in the mouth. Kyle Nicholas wasn't available because he just gave you 2 innings the day before, trying to eliminate Colin Holderman from being part of that ramp up, right? So I think they're already kind of on the decision train to kind of pull back from Colin Holderman. And I think you saw a little bit of anger from Derek Shelton too. Like, you can question the decision, but at the end of the day, this is a guy that we've trusted and he needs to execute. He didn't. They said this stuff earlier with Rowdy Tellez, and it finally worked out. They said it with Chapman. They said it with Bednar. They've said it with Keller, even when he struggled a little bit out the gate. I think what we're learning is the Pirates are patient with their players, but it's mostly because they really trust what they have in them.
Well, yeah, and I feel like this is something that everybody needs to hear as well, is like, let's also remember that Colin Holderman has given up more earned runs in the last week than he gave up all year before this week. And
Ethan, I wanted him to be an all-star. I straight up pitched for it. He really, really should have been in that consideration. So in a matter of like 3 or 4 weeks, we've gone from that to people calling for him to be DFA'd. It shows how stupid fans are, for one thing. And it shows how fickle bullpen arms are. Mm-hmm. It's why you can't ever go, I've got these 7 guys. We're set.
Yeah, no.
Don't work that way.
And we've seen that this year. And I even want to tie into O'Neal Cruz, who had a terrible series in Houston, comes into this Arizona series, starts the first game 5 for 5. A lot of this stuff happens, folks, and I think it all goes to my main point that I wanted to bring up at the top of the show. Is I remember me and Gary sitting here about 4 or 5 months ago, and on this very show, and probably even on his show at some point, discussing where this team would fall. And Gary, you really struck the nail on the head with saying that this team is a around 500 team that is going to be competitive through the entire thing. As far as wins are concerned, I predicted 83 to 84. You predicted 86. Still very viable. Now, they would have to play some really good baseball down the stretch to get to 86 wins. But I do think that when they lose series like this to, say, Arizona, or the San Diego series starts tomorrow, but let's just say they go into the San Diego series and lose that one, then I understand being frustrated, right? But at the end of the day, this is the first time they're really in this spot in, I would say, 6 or 7 years now. 2018, I would say, was the last time they were even like remotely competitive as far as this point in the season. And it's a learning curve. These guys have to learn and have to figure out a way to beat the other teams that are right there with them. And I think it's okay to take a step back from your frustration, folks, and look at that and say, okay, here we are. They could easily go win 2 of 3. Like, Gary, you told me this before we started recording. They could go win 2 of 3, and the next thing you know, Pirates are back in the World Series conversation.
Well, there's a reason that it's like that, too. It's because, as much as you hate this stretch of games and you look at it as a gauntlet, it is. It's also an opportunity. Those numbers, like, you're back 3 games right now. Well, cool. But you're playing everybody who's right in front of you. Like, in baseball, you get a 2-for-1 when you beat those guys head to head. So now, does that mean like I think the Pirates are going to do that? No. Does it definitely work the other way when they beat you? Yeah. But it's right there for you. You control your own destiny. How many times have you come into like the last couple weeks of like a Steelers season and the only thing that they can say is we control our own destiny? Well, you win, you're in. Well, that's where the Pirates are at. They win, they get a chance to be in. They don't, they're out. I love facing the better competition at this time of the year. The alternative is you're playing teams like the White Sox, and you're beating them. But the Padres are playing the Marlins and beating the crap out of them. Like, you get to play head to head and have a chance to leapfrog them. That's all you can ask for this time of year. You put yourself in position to potentially win.
Yeah, and it's an opportunity that really, when you look at the rest of the schedule, they're not going to get much of an opportunity to do this again. I mean, this is really the last time that they're going to be playing teams that I would say are directly involved with what they're doing, because they've already faced the Mets twice. They've already now faced Arizona twice, so that's going to be in the back, that's going to be in the back of their minds surely throughout the rest of the year. Now you get a chance to play San Diego 6 times over the next 9 games. Win 4 or 6 of those, and you're feeling pretty good. You lose 4 of 6 of those, you're feeling pretty bad. So it could be one of those very more important stretches that we discuss all the time, where you look back and you say, okay, well, here we go. And then after that, I don't even remember who they're playing. I think it's Texas and Seattle. So yeah, I agree with your point 100%. I mean, this is their chance right here to just make up for it. I mean, truthfully, it just is.
Yeah. I mean, and if you don't have the stomach for that, well, it's been a long time since you've watched a playoff race. That's all I can say. And I understand completely why you feel the way you do. That said, this was a 500-ish team at the beginning of the season. It's going to be a 500-ish team at the end of the season. Even if they get in, you're going to be able to rightfully call them a 500-ish team, because that's what they are.
Yep.
I mean, like, that's what they're constructed to be. We said a few weeks ago on this show, I think I started out by just going, my God, Ethan, they are such a 500 team. They really are.
Yep.
Not too high, not too low. It's just where they are.
Well, and even look at it before we go on to talking about IKF, Brian De La Cruz, and Jalen Beeks, who we all saw throughout the week. I mean, they're on a crazy tear right now as far as some record that they're trying to like fight around for not losing 3 games in a row. I mean, when was the last time they lost 3 games in a row? May? I mean, it has to be a long time, because let's not forget, folks, they had that really long stretch of games where they won 2 games in a row or lost 2 in a row, but that third game they never got through. It was like a really weird stat that we saw. But really, at the end of the day, I just think it's keeping our expectations realistic as fans. If you want to talk about other things unrealistically, this might not this might not be the show for you. It just might not be, truthfully. But for everybody that tunes in, thank you, because now after this, we got to see some of the new guys make an impact throughout the week in IKF, Brian De La Cruz and Jalen Beeks. How have they impacted this club already? How will they continue to do so throughout the rest of the season? We'll discuss in just a moment. Today's episode is brought to you by Liquid IV. Get 20% off your first order when you go to liquidiv.com and use code MLB. Because when you're taking in America's pastime, don't forget to hydrate with Liquid IV's Popsicle Firecracker flavor, a surefire summer hit. Blast off with the iconic summer flavors of Popsicle Firecracker, a festive blend of citrus-fueled lemon lime, tart cherry, and raspberry flavors. Find all your favorite flavors on their website, from acai berry, lemon lime, and pina colada. Powered by Live HydroSense, an optimized ratio of electrolytes, essential vitamins, and clinically tested nutrients that turn ordinary water into extraordinary hydration. All you have to do is tear, pour, and live more, because all you need is 1 stick of Liquid IV and 16 ounces of water to hydrate you better than water alone. So no more thirsty summers when you indulge in hydration with Liquid IV. Get 20% off your first order of Liquid IV when you go to liquidiv.com and use code MLB at checkout. That's 20% off your first order when you shop Better Hydration today using promo code MLB at liquidiv.com. And folks, thank you for making Locked On Pirates your first listen of the day. For your second listen, enjoy the Locked On MLB podcast. Host Paul Francis Sullivan, also known as Sully, is here to provide national expertise with his trademark humor to help you get ready for the MLB playoffs here in the dog days of summer. Prepare for the Fall Classic with Sully, who has it all covered every single day on Locked On MLB, available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So the trade deadline is now about a week removed now. And I remember on this very show on last Monday, we were discussing, hey, things will probably happen, and a lot happened. a lot happened as far as what the Pirates were doing in that last hour. And folks, I forget who tweeted it, but it was probably one of the funnier tweets that you'll see all year. Under the Brian De La Cruz acquisition tweet that the Pirates had, there was a gentleman that said, did we really expect the team that releases lineup cards 15 days or 15 minutes before games to make any moves at the deadline an hour before? And that's what they did. And I thought that was really hilarious. But we've come a week removed now, and you have Brian De La Cruz, IKF, and Jalen Beeks already on this roster. Obviously, you have Joshua Walker and Nick York and a lot of other moves that were made. But I've liked what I've seen from all three of these guys so far. I think IKF is going to bring a different element to this lineup and already has done so. Brian De La Cruz, I know a lot of people, as I've already mentioned on the show plenty of times, are going to get very frustrated with the swing and miss with him. Kid can hit, truthfully. He has a ton of power, and when he hits the ball, it's going to go hard somewhere. And Jalen Beeks, he's there for what he's supposed to be there for. He's a left-handed specialist that's going to give you an inning against lefties and be pretty decent in doing so. So what have been your first kind of responses, or I don't know what word I'm looking for here, but your first look at these guys, what has been your reaction?
I mean, pretty much what I expected from each of them. I like that they're all, helpful. Will be not Beaks, but like the two big ones are helpful next year as well.
Yeah.
And I think they'll need that. It's basically an upgrade over anything you kind of considered reserves or starters before. And it gives people a good benchmark to have to beat to get playing time. I love that. Like, so if Jack Sawinski's going to make his way back, well, he's going to have to out-hit Brian De La Cruz, or at least prove that versus righties he's way better, because there isn't going to be anybody just handing him a spot. Like, I think there's an awful lot of that to these moves, that it moves into next year. It kind of makes sure that the overall baseline for the team heading into next year is a little bit higher than it was going into this one. And the pitching staff is that much more developed and ready to kind of deploy. So I love the way they look for next year. This year, I don't know that they help get them in a playoff necessarily. De La Cruz is very streaky. If he gets really hot, yeah, he could carry this team. He's very much so Josh Bell when he gets hot. Like, when he starts hitting them, he'll hit them for a week, maybe even two. Isaiah kind of for Leffa, this is a career year. The stay, yeah. I mean, he certainly hit the ball harder than I remember him hitting it when he was with the Rangers or even New York just yesterday. So I don't think I've ever seen him line a ball over someone's head in the outfield. So that's great. And the defense is awesome. You can put him anywhere you want in the entire field, and he's a plus defender. And that's a Swiss Army knife. I love having that on the team. Overall, pretty good additions. Beeks was a little weird for me to begin with. I think there's probably better lefties out there that they could have gone for, but whatever. They see something they like, and I can't fault them for that. They've been smarter about retaining lefties than I am. I haven't liked almost anybody they've brought in as a lefty, and look what they've done. So,
yeah. And I go into Isaiah Kiner Falefa for a second. A lot of people also forget that I believe he's under team control through next year, correct? Or is it a team option? I don't remember what contractual obligation there is there with IKF. But either way, that's not the point here. There's a player he reminds me of a lot already. Josh Harrison. He feels like a Josh Harrison type immediately to me. I don't know why, but like, I remember when Josh Harrison was on this team, you could stick him at second, you could stick him at third, you could stick him wherever you needed to stick him, and he's not going to break it. One thing I will tell people that I was already seeing, IKF is never going to be a plus power guy. Do not worry about that with him at all. You never, ever have to worry about that with him at any extent of his career. But he's going to be something this team needed this year. A consistent bat in the middle of the lineup. They haven't had it yet. I mean, yeah, Nick Gonzalez has been great, but they've moved him around. Rowdy Tellez had his big comeback, but he hasn't been by any means consistent. And then you look at some other guys that have been there. Joey Bart has had a really good string of things as of late, but I wouldn't say consistent as far as what he's done all year. IKF and what he's done all year has been consistently good. And having that in the middle of the order now to where when you get 1 through 5 or wherever they please to bat IKF moving forward, you're not just saying, oh, yeah, here comes 6 through 9. That's 4 outs. IKF eliminates that, I think. And I think that that's almost a bigger component than what Brian De La Cruz does for you with his power element in the outfield.
I mean, I think on a really, really good team, like a team that I would look at the roster on paper and go like, yeah, this one's going to the playoffs. IKF isn't in my top 5, probably. I mean, like, he's probably batting in the bottom third, and he's consistent, and he's hitting, close to 300. He's getting on base. He's driving the bottom part of that order and flipping it over to the next part. So I'm not 100% sure that I'm comfortable bringing him in and thinking he's a heart of the order type player. I don't believe that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think he can fill a good role as the leadoff guy for a while and maybe push Kutch down a little bit. I think he can definitely do more when he gets on base than Kutch does, as far as like moving himself up. And I would like to see him maybe like in the 5 hole. I think something like that plays really well. I'm not a fan of having De La Cruz back cleanup. Again, unless he starts getting on a heater, then you move him up. But he's a lot like Josh Bell. When you have him, you're going to put him in that position because there's no sense in having him if he isn't in that position.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the lineup construction that I would have in a perfect day, let's just say a righty's on there, is I would still ride with the Kutch leadoff thing, Reynolds, Cruz, Tellez, and then that's where I think the 2 new guys would come in, is maybe have De La Cruz against a righty at number 5 and Tellez at 4, and then have IKF at 6. Because then you're still talking about having guys like Joey Bart in the lineup, Ke'Bryan Hayes, even Michael A. Taylor, who very streaky in his own right, can have a couple games for you. So that's where I think that those 2 moves helped more than what they're actually doing. I mean, they're both very talented players, obviously, but I think it made the lineup construction a little bit easier now because you're not looking at certain spots in the order and seeing Jack Sawinski or Alika Williams or whoever and just saying, yep, that's an out. Like you maybe have 1 or 2 of those now instead of 4. I mean, we remember
it lengthened the lineup. That's what they needed to do. And it made it a little bit harder to put out something that you felt like a whole third or half of it wasn't going to contribute.
Yeah.
So certainly it's improved that. Now we just got to see it take place on the field. That's all.
Yeah. And I mean, they had their moments throughout the weekend for sure. Brian De La Cruz opened the scoring yesterday. IKF, I believe, for the first time in his career, had a double and a triple in the same game. So a lot of different stuff going on. And also loved finding out, by the way, about IKF that he's a distant relative of Ralph Kiner. I never put 2 and 2 together. I always wondered about that, but I never put it together. Very cool for him to be in Pittsburgh now. Also heard that Garrett Cole reached out to him, apparently, upon his arrival to Pittsburgh. So cool stuff for the new guys. And obviously, we'll still learn more about the trade deadline even next year because you have guys like Nick York and Josh Walker and even these guys that we just talked about that can be contributors next season. But we're not talking about next season because there's something a little different about this season than the last 3 that I've covered on this show. And that's that the Pirates are competitive in August. So let's not lose sight of that. We'll discuss in a minute. Today's episode of Locked On Pirates is brought to you by PrizePicks. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100 because that means you can turn $10 into $1,000 because you can now win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. With PrizePicks, you can do that While Team USA is racking up the gold medals this summer, you can make a PrizePicks lineup of players across basketball, soccer, tennis, golf, and more in as little as 60 seconds. Just pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you're locked in. Folks, you can always bet on the Pittsburgh Pirates on PrizePicks as well. If you think that Brian Reynolds can hit a home run on any given day, well, chances are his home run total is 0.5, and you can bet on over or under on that because all you're doing is playing against the numbers. So download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. That's code LOCKEDONMLB on PrizePicks for a deposit match up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy with PrizePicks. Alrighty, folks, and welcome back to the third and final part of today's episode of Locked On Pirates, where my cat is currently biting my finger because she's restless and asking why I'm continuing to do this. Well, I continue to do this is because I love doing this show for all of you. We just passed 2,000 subscribers not too long ago and are already creeping up on 2,100. So thank you all for always tuning into the show as you do on YouTube and all of your audio platforms. And you long-term everyday listeners would know that I've been doing this show since October of 2020, and this is the first season where I can realistically look at this team on August 5th and say they have a realistic shot at the postseason. Gary, I don't think you would disagree with that. I mean, they definitely do. And I would like folks to remember that, is that, yes, we have the old adage that games mean more in August and September than they do in April and May. And I know that they all count the same, but the Pirates still have about 2 months to really compete for this thing. And they have proven throughout parts of the season they can beat anybody. They've proven that. And they've also proven they can fall out of the race just as easily as they got back into it. I mean, that's just what kind of team they are. And like we discussed earlier on the show, at the end of the day, folks, it's up to them. That's the beauty in all this, I think, is it's really up to the players on the field now to do this thing. And coming out of it however they do, the only guys responsible are going to be the coaching staff and the players at this point. There's nobody else responsible anymore.
If I have one thing to kind of say about this final part of the season that maybe I haven't heard very much or thought about, I'm actually going to write about this in 5 thoughts a little bit. A lot of seasons you'll see at the deadline, a whole bunch of the front runners really, really, really improve themselves. They go from a team that's probably going to win 90 games to a team that probably caps off around 100 or 105, right? Like you see that sort of improvement in roster construction because of that. And it causes like the gauntlet to get even more of a gauntlet a lot of the time. That didn't happen this year. No team went from 90 wins to 115. No team brought in something that is going to turn their team from something mediocre into something gigantic and scary. Some teams are getting healthier at the right time, and maybe that will contribute to that, but they didn't go out and buy it. So the Pirates aren't going to be facing like team after team of like these super juggernauts. They're not. I mean, and even this Arizona series, they hung in there. Yep. It's not like they got walloped. And I don't think the Padres will wallop them. I mean, they have great offense too. They've got terrific pitching. Like, I don't want to face Dylan Cease any more than anybody wants to face Paul Skeens. But the Pirates, they don't have to beat Dylan Cease straight up. They can beat Dylan Cease by just outlasting him. They're in everything here. They're right where they need to be as far as this year goes. That's all. I'm going to watch this last 51 games with an awful lot of excitement about the fact that it's not getting dismantled after this year.
Yeah,
it's going to get bolted onto.
And I think that's a very important component to all this too, is that I've seen some people compare these teams, and I've done it even too, where I say 2018 or 2012. I think it compares so much more to 2012 because when you look around this roster, The only players that you can even really make a case for that won't be here are Michael A. Taylor, Rowdy Tellez, maybe. You don't know what they're going to do yet. Maybe they try to sign him again. And Yasmani Grandal. Outside of that, mostly everybody else I would expect is probably going to be here next year again. Maybe you float around Connor Joe in trade talks in the offseason, but I don't really see much else outside of that. I'm obviously leaving pitching and stuff like that out of this. Like, you obviously have Marco Gonzalez and like a lot of those relievers that you might not see, but I don't think pitching is really going to be all that different than what we're seeing this year. And same thing with the lineup.
I like the direction they're headed in. I really do. And I think that there's reason for optimism. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't be frustrated this year. I do think we'll see them potentially throw away an opportunity here, and maybe they could have done a little bit more to give themselves a better shot at it. It's so hard to do that offensively.
Yeah.
It's really hard to do that offensively. You almost have a better shot at doing that pitching wise. Like, you can fortify pitching by just building up a bullpen, that you didn't have. Well, they kind of felt like they had one despite recent performances, and offense, man, I think they did kind of good. Isaiah Kiner-Falefa was killing it. I mean, he was really in the competition for American League batting titles. So that's a guy that's actually been hitting, and De La Cruz adds some power. They really needed that too. So I don't know. I like the additions. I love where we're at. I'm excited to go through the rest of this season and see where it takes us. And worst case scenario, you get some, late season Braxton Ashcraft, Mike Burrows time, just to kind of see what they can do. Right. I mean, I think that would be the worst thing that could possibly happen, is the last week turns into auditions.
Yeah, and I mean, just to throw out something to end the show, you were mentioning that the Pirates throughout the rest of the year, you look at all these games that they'll play. Now, listen closely because I'm going to read them fast. Padres, Dodgers, Padres, Mariners, Rangers, Reds, Cubs, Guardians, Cubs, Nationals, Marlins, Royals, Cardinals, Reds, Brewers, Yankees. There's not one series in there I don't think the Pirates can win. Seriously.
I mean, I don't think that all season long we have entered a series that I didn't feel that they should be competitive.
Well, remember we joked about that. Is why we don't do the series preview thing.
Because my answer would be 2 of 3 every time.
And I mean, honestly, mine would be too. I mean, anytime I see Keller and Skeens on the mound, I'm just picking 2 out of 3 right away. And that's just how I think a lot of fans should operate, truthfully. But at the end of the day, folks, just remember that on this show, I'm going to have fun. So you should too for these final 51 games of the MLB season. You never know. They might not be the final 51 for your Pittsburgh Pirates either. Folks, thank you for tuning into this show, as you always do here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team, your Pittsburgh Pirates every day. My socials right there at MVP_Ethan or at Locked On Pirates for all of your news, analysis, and opinions and reactions to everything coming from a fan to fans like you. Gary will have 5 thoughts at 5 on Steel City Pirates. Pirates Fan Forum, what do you got this week? On Thursday?
I don't know. It might just be Jim and I. We're going to be having Lastings Millage on pretty soon. That's going to be fun. He just took a hitting coach position with the State College Spikes, so I wanted to talk to him a little bit about hitting and maybe the freak show years of the Pittsburgh Pirates. That would be some good stuff to discuss, but we'll see when that comes together.
Yeah, and of course, I will have the series preview on this show and on Steel City Pirates tomorrow. So if you like writing or like listening to me talk, or you like both, you can get double the action for this Padre series, which we will be discussing tomorrow. But until then, see you on the flip side.